morning. It is now 11 o'clock and we are excited to get started. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Salvation Army Behind the Red Shield Zoom presentation. My name is Tim Kaiser and I am a charitable gift advisor here at the Salvation Army, and I will be your host today. Roberta Pronto is the Divisional Director of Development and she will be our co-host. Just a few housekeeping items. If you are new to Zoom, like many of us are, you'll see a chat button at the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions that you would like to share, we would love to use that chat button and direct them to Roberta, and we'll do our best to answer them. Also, each speaker after their presentation will be answering some questions as well. Finally, we are recording this session so we can share this with you at a later date. One of the questions that we've been asked often since COVID started is, how are we doing here at the Salvation Army? And today we have three very gifted speakers that have lots of information to share with you to help answer that question. They are Executive Director Ivy Scobie of the William Booth Special Care Home in Regina, Major Ed Dean of the Maple Creek Community Church, Executive Director Judy Regime of the Crossroads Residential Services in Saskatchewan. Unable to join us today is Captain Sam Tim of Yorkton. At this time, we'd like to introduce the Divisional Commander of the Division, Major Les Marshall, to say hello and welcome. Welcome, Major Les.
Thank you so much, Tim. It's great to be here. Hello, everyone, and good morning. My wife and I have just moved here back to the Prairies, actually, after serving the last 7 years in Toronto at our national office and in Vancouver at our regional office. And we are thrilled to be back home, and we're looking forward to leading and serving this region for years to come. It is a privilege for me to welcome you here to today's call. I am so grateful for the technology that affords us this opportunity to be able to connect and provide you with a snapshot of what the Salvation Army is doing and how we're trying to bring hope to people during a pandemic. Of course, without your ongoing support, we couldn't do this, what we do every day. This isn't something we just simply say, but rather it is our reality. It's genuine and sincere. We really do thank you. Since 1892, the Salvation Army has been coming alongside people in our community, our neighbors, our colleagues, friends, families, seniors, the impoverished, men, women, children, brothers and sisters, serving people without discrimination in Saskatchewan. From the outset of the pandemic, like everyone else, the Salvation Army has had to find ways to provide practical support. The changes have forced us to make decisions that we may never have made prior to the pandemic, but things that have actually helped us become even more effective than we ever have before. While it's natural for us to want to rush back to normal, I want our organization to choose better than normal. I want us to be more effective and more creative than we ever have before. I'm very proud of our team. I'm very proud of how we have shifted to provide even more transformational, life-changing programs, one person at a time. I'm very proud of how we are giving hope today. As the largest non-governmental direct provider of social services in Canada, the Salvation Army offers unprecedented support to our society's most vulnerable. So when you give to the Salvation Army, you are giving hope today by investing in the future of marginalized and overlooked people. You really do make a difference. And on behalf of the Salvation Army, I personally say thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Major Les. I'm looking forward to better than normal as well. At this time, we'd like to draw your attention to our presenters. Each presenter will have a few minutes to share on some of the changes that they've had to manage because of COVID-19. Again, if you have any questions, please use the chat button below and direct them to Roberta. To start things off, we're going to go to Executive Director Ivy Scobie of the William Booth Special Care Home. Welcome, Ivy.
Welcome. My name is Ivy Scobie, and I'm the Executive Director for the William Booth Special Care Home and also the Regina Wascana Grace Hospice here in Regina, Saskatchewan. Besides our long-term care beds, we are a little bit different. Our home in the name Special Care really reflects what we do. We have our residential long-term care, as I said, but then we have 4 temporary programs that really provides care and attention to those in our community that otherwise may not have a place to be. One of our programs is the respite program, and respite is really care for the caregiver. It's for individuals who are living at home and they are being cared for by either home care or their family. And so they come in anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks to give their caregiver time away to do some, either go on vacation or just to do some of the appointments and whatnot that they would need to do. Then we also have the adult day support program. And this program is really a wonderful program. It has approximately 100 participants that attend. And we are open 7 days a week, which is unusual for a day support program. And we're also open on the weekends. And this also provides respite to those who are living in the community, the 100 people living in the community who do require care, but are cared for either again by home care or their family member, but just require a little bit more socialization and maybe some daily care, such as tub baths or wound dressings, etc. And then we have our convalescent program, which is a subacute program, and it's for individuals, again, living in our community, who have either had a major surgery, such as a total hip replacement, a total knee replacement, maybe an illness or an accident, and they need more time recuperating. And rather than staying in a acute care hospital, they're able to come to our unit, and we have a full physio department here, and the length of stay on that program is anywhere from 5 days to 5 weeks, and then they're discharged back out to the community. And then our last program is our hospice program. And this hospice program is a 10-bed unit that provides end-of-life palliative care. We have been open since 2005 and been the only hospice in Saskatchewan until just recently. I think there's going to be one opening up in the near future in Saskatoon. So that program is really for individuals who have increased care needs or increased pain management. And it's not a place to die, but it's rather a place to come and live well for the short time that they have left. They don't have to worry about pain management. They don't have to worry about care needs, and their loved one is able to actually go along this journey during a very vulnerable time in their life. All our programs here provide psychosocial, recreation, and of course the physical care. And so we're very happy to meet that gap in our community for individuals that live here. Just to give you an example of how we differ from maybe a different long-term care facility, is a facility our size would have 30 admissions a year. We have 500. So that sort of shows you who we're serving and the scope of our service to the community. We are noted as one of the homes of choice here in Regina, with a 2-year waiting list for our long-term care beds. We have a motto here and what we say when we interview staff, and they'll never go wrong if they remember this, is that staff are not working in a workplace. They are working in a residence home. And if they remember that, that sort of sets the expectations for all the care and service that we provide. So everything was going well. We have a very dynamic home. We're moving along, and then March 11th hits. March 11th, the World Health Organization declared a pandemic, a worldwide pandemic, and being part of the world, it affected us too. So everything that we knew, all our processes that we had in place, changed drastically. And I'll just give you a little idea on some stats. The Canadian Patient Safety Institute said that during this time, at the beginning of the COVID, 8 out of 10 deaths were related to long-term care. And the National Institute of Aging said that out of 18,000 cases that first arose, 1/3, actually more than 1/3, 7,000 were people living in a long-term care setting. So that was quite devastating for all long-term cares across Canada. So what we had to do now was we had to take directives from public health and medical health officers, and those directives were mandatory. And so of course we had to do them, and I'll give you a little snapshot of what we did. I first want to say that I'm very happy that none of our staff or our residents have tested positive for COVID-19. And I attribute that to the diligence of our staff and the managers at the front line who have ensured not only at work to keep people safe, but also when they leave here and go home. So we're very happy about that, and we're very proud of that. So what did we do to keep people safe? Well, the first thing we had to do was lock our front door. So when that directive came, the doors were locked. We had to have everybody screened. Only authorized personnel were allowed to come into the facility, and all group sessions were stopped. Our adult day support program, unfortunately, because it was community-based, because of the community spread, had to be suspended. And visitation to all programs, this was a big one, was stopped to all of our programs, with the exception of compassionate visits. And even those were curtailed according to what the medical health officers told us. It was devastating, not only for us, not only for the residents, not only for the staff, but for the families. You can imagine the families of very vulnerable people who now remember the stats that I talked about. We're hearing these terrible stats from across Canada. And so what were we doing to make people safe? So how did we manage? I'll just give you a few little excerpts of what we did differently. Well, first of all, we had to embrace the medical health officers' directives. So we had to think outside of the box to still maintain some quality of life for our residents. So what we did differently was, well, the first thing we had to do was communicate. I think communication was number one. As I said, the families, now they couldn't come in and visit. They were wondering what's going on. One of the things that we do here at William Booth is when somebody's admitted, we get an email of every single person's family member. And what we do is we were able to email them, and we would email them newsletters, not newsletters, they more of a letter saying what we're doing, this is what's happening today, these are the directives, this is how we're coping. And I got really good feedback from the families on that, because they were able to know that people were safe and that what they heard on the news wasn't happening here. What we did differently. So the first thing we did was virtual visits. We always had virtual visits, but not to the extent that was needed at this time. So we went out and we purchased iPads, we brought in extra staff, and we had bookings all day, all evening, and we had virtual visits with families right across Canada. And I have to say that some of our residents got more visits during the pandemic than they did previous because of these virtual visits. So now people could actually book a time, and they could see their loved one, and they could interact. And it was just such a good venue to use during this COVID. The other thing is that no families at the very beginning were not allowed to bring in anything. They weren't allowed to bring in extra treats for the residents. They weren't allowed to bring in clothes, etc. So we decided that we would fill that gap. And so we went out and we set up a nice roving cart, and we had recreation staff take it to all the rooms twice daily, and residents were able to choose whatever they wanted off the cart, and it was free of charge, because really the residents couldn't get it from their family members. So we thought that we would subsidize that. Care needs. Now this is a big one. We have staff that work in various facilities, so we had to cohort our staff. So only the staff that worked at our place could work at our place. We didn't let them work anywhere else, because there could be that spread back and forth. So again, we had to maintain their hours of work, etc. And again, we had to cohort the staff to the different units to keep people safe in case we went into an outbreak. We implemented continuous masking, and that means that as soon as you get to the front door, you are screened, temperature, etc., and you have to wear a mask for the whole time that you're on site here. And so we had to come around with some routines and figure out how that was all going to work. Our recreational groups, as I said, there was no group activities, which is a big part of long-term care. So we had to think outside the box again. And what we did is, remember now, people were in their rooms or along and only in groups of 5 or maybe 10, but they had to be 6 feet apart. So what we did is we did hallway recreation. And we purchased a PA system that we could, a portable one, and we actually did the programs down the 5 different hallways that we have, and residents would come to their rooms. And I think at the little video at the beginning, you saw residents at their doorways, and they were still participating. Chapel, which is foundational to our facility. We have chapel every day, and we have a church service on Sunday. And residents are very keen to attend. And sometimes family members. So we thought, how are we going to do this? Well, we did it the same way. We did 5 mini chapels down the hallways using the portable PA systems. And I have to say that the recreational staff, because obviously the chaplain couldn't do them all, stepped up and they provided wonderful chapel services along during the week. Traditionally, in long-term care, we celebrate birthdays because birthdays are important. And this time, I'll just share with you this one birthday that we celebrated. One of our residents became a centurion. She celebrated her 100th anniversary, or not anniversary, well, her anniversary of her birth. And so, so what do you do during a COVID outbreak? They can't have visitors in, we can't really have groups anymore. So again, thinking outside the box, what the staff did was, in the morning, she started off with virtual visits, and she had family right across Canada, from Ontario right through to Victoria. And so she visited with them, and then the staff gussied her all up and got her into nice, wonderful clothing and a crown. Because I mean, when you're 100, you deserve a crown, okay? So she got a crown, and then they proceeded to take her down the 5 hallways, and there was a procession with balloons and everything. And I think you saw that also in that little video at the beginning. And the residents came to their room, their doorways, and they clapped and they sang happy birthday and they cheered. And she just felt like a queen for a day, and so she should. Of course, we ended up with a cake, but of course she had the cake, and we gave cupcakes to everybody else because of the individual portions that we had to provide. We even actually made it to the front page of our local newspaper, and the caption was "A positive during a very trying time," which is the COVID. So it was a positive story during a time. And we also were featured in the Saskatchewan Health Authority newsletter, again, a positive during a very trying time. So going forward, I think if you look forward, we have to look forward far into the future. I think we're in it for the long haul. We're going to have to continue to take orders from the medical health officer. We're going to have to continue to adapt every day because things change every day. And we have to continue to provide quality of life to those we serve. One of the positives that I think has come out of this pandemic, if there can be a positive, is that the face of long-term care the profile has been risen. With all of the bad publicity across Canada about long-term care, what has happened is, healthcare has always sort of looked at acute care, and long-term care was always in the background, especially for funding or for any priorities. And so I think it's taken on a new focus, and I know I've been hearing on the news that different provinces have new incentives. And so I'm hoping that this will continue well into the future. So if anything positive can come from this, that's what has come from the long-term care sector. I guess it's just too bad that it took a pandemic to raise this profile of such a vulnerable population living in our society who actually have founded our communities that we live in. I think that it is going forward. I think that we will do well. I'm very happy to be serving in this capacity of executive director at the William Booth Special Care Home, providing all these various programs to our community, and to be working for a Christian organization that embraces hope, service, dignity, and stewardship as their foundational values. And I think that will see us through any challenges we have in the future. So again, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to some of the challenges we had in long-term care and how we got through them. And we will work through this. Thank you.
That's amazing, Ivy. So much that you guys had to change, and so many things that you're doing that unless you're part of it, you don't realize. I have a couple questions that I have here for you. I heard change a lot in your presentation. I really liked some of the changes that you've had with visitation, how you've had to bring technology in to help, and how it's actually improving. Do you see these changes in visitation staying after we're able to go back to face-to-face visits?
Well, as I said before, we have always had some form of a virtual visit because we realize people have families across the country and the world. However, we will continue to offer this because, as I said before, it actually opened up visitation for people that maybe only saw their son from Texas twice a year. Well, now they can see him every week. You know, we can schedule a visit. And so it's good for not only the residents, but also for the families. And we certainly will. And changes for the other changes that I think that we will embrace, you know, living in a long-term care facility, you have normal outbreaks, if there's such a thing as a normal outbreak. It's not a pandemic, it's just a normal outbreak. And so I think these hallway visits, you know, the roving treat cart, the chapel that we can provide now down the different hallways, we will continue to do that when we go into just a common cold or whatnot, and they deem us an outbreak. We will continue those processes.
Wow, that's perfect. Last question here is, I heard that you had to change things very quickly, like lives were literally at stake when March 11th hit, and you had to shut everything down. Was there anything that kind of surprised you that you never thought that you'd have to do with some of these changes?
Well, one of the more heartbreaking change that we had to do was limit visiting, and especially limit visiting to end-of-life care, compassionate visits. Remember, we have the hospice here, and so we have people who are in their last few weeks of life, and they're visiting as they knew it before was different. And one of the things that we had to institute was they could only have one designated family member. And so how do you choose one person to come and take that journey with you? I had one lady say to me, but I have 2 children. Like, how do I pick one? And well enough, how does she? So again, think outside the box. We figured out the window visits, we figured out the virtual so she could see them. And so we were able to accommodate that. But certainly that was one of the more heartbreaking duties that I had, was to implement the medical health officer's directives that said only one person. And I think, you know, lessons will be learned from this, because I know we were allowed to have one person visit. Some places weren't. And I think the lesson learned was that we have to figure out how we can come alongside somebody who's dying, because nobody should have to die alone without that physical touch.
Wow, I completely agree. Ivy, thank you so much for your time today, and we're so glad that you're there. Our next guest today is Major Ed Dean. Major Ed is the Corps Officer at the Maple Creek Community Church in Maple Creek. Last year, he actually also did double duty at Swift Current Ministry Unit, and he's going to be sharing a little bit today. Welcome, Major Ed.
It's my pleasure to join you this morning from Maple Creek. As Tim said, I've been the Corps Officer in Maple Creek for a number of years. I've been involved with the Salvation Army for 16 years, 14 of those in the beautiful community of Maple Creek. And then last year, taking on the role of Corps Officer in Swift Current with my wife. And that was a pleasure as well. In both communities, we have a food bank, a thrift store, and a church. Things have changed. Maple Creek is a community of 2,500 people, but we serve an area of roughly 11,000 kilometers with a number of Hutterite colonies in there. I believe there's 10, and 10 communities. And so it's a vast area, but it's a pleasure serving it in these communities. At the beginning of COVID-19, we had to make some drastic changes. Our food banks, how we did them, our church, our thrift stores. Our thrift stores closed for a number of months, but our food bank serving the communities was vitally important at that time. Our churches closed for the first time in 100 years. And so how do you do church and still reach your congregation? They were important things to hold on to. We've been able to do virtual church. It's not the same as sitting in a congregation, singing the songs, having coffee together. And so we've done things differently, thinking outside the box, as has been already said this morning. Some of it was doing church in a different way. Yes, we would record our messages, but some of it was doing church through a meal. Both communities had a community meal each week. We had to think of a way that we could deliver that community meal to the people that needed it. And so we have thought of different ways. Sometimes it was making the delivery to the seniors' residence, where they could then gather that meal at safe distancing. Other times, it was making a bag lunch and putting it out on our free market. And that's been a wonderful way to reach those in our community that we may not necessarily have been able to reach. Those that are not used to coming and tapping into a food bank and saying, you know, I could use that little bit more. I could use a little bit of help. I don't need the food bank, or I'm not comfortable going to a food bank. Some of that was able to be done through the wonderful partnership of our Hutterite community. They have literally provided thousands of pounds of produce during this COVID time. When the outbreak happened in their communities, we were able to reach out because of the partnerships that have been built over the years and the relationships there. And so even when the news broke that there was some outbreaks in their communities, we called them to see if we could help them in their time of challenge. And as things progressed along, they were still providing to our communities the produce and stuff that was needed, of course, with safe distancing protocols in place. We wore masks, they wore masks. You can put it on a cart and we'll bring it in. And it's great that they were able to still be a part of their community and serving in that way. Our free market has reached out. We have seen everything on that market, from squash to yogurt to potatoes. 5,000 pounds of potatoes were given out in 48 hours. That's a lot of potatoes, and especially when you see that arrive. But through the many partnerships, our food bank never ran out in either location. And for the first while, we were doing hampers so that families had groceries because we wanted them to be safe. We have reached into community through some of our vulnerable people, vitally important to be protecting. Our ministry at one of the hotels, bringing food to them when the restaurants were closed, where they would normally be able to go and get their meal, was no longer available to them. And so how do you think outside the box? and find a way that they will have food and stuff. And most of this was done with some gracious volunteers that came alongside us and said, I can do this, I can do this. And of course, we had to think, how do we keep people in our community safe? How do we keep our staff and volunteers safe? And so with all the protocols that were put into place, we were have been very successful in doing that. But it's with every precaution taken to make sure that all areas of our community are safe. During the pandemic, we checked on seniors. We checked on those in the hotels. We checked on those that are living in precarious places. We see them coming to pick up the lunch. They don't think that we notice them, but we do. They are our community. Those are the people whom the Salvation Army has been called to serve. And we take great honor in being able to serve them. Another area that we've been able to serve is with our backpack program, as you've seen in the videos. The backpack program is a wonderful program to be able to reach the families, to make sure that children are be able to go to school with the needs and the supplies like every other child. This morning, as we gather in this way, we say thank you to our many partners. We thank you to those for the generosity of the gifts that have been given to us to be able to serve in our communities.
Thanks so much, Ed. Wow, there's, again, being in a rural area, there's so many things that fall in your lap that are very unique. One of the things I heard is the free market, how you started a free market to try to maintain the dignity of the clients, the people that actually need our help. How successful did you find the free market to be in actually reaching the people you're trying to that have food insecurity?
Oh, that has been very successful. We've even had volunteers come to the free market and say, can I take stuff to the other side of the city in Swift Current, where some of the seniors live that didn't have transportation to come and get from that free market. And so that was a very successful piece. It's still going on every day in both Swift Current and in Maple Creek. We have a free market. And I believe that it's serving a great purpose. People are accessing it. They are accessing our food banks. And we've been able to resource people with other services that we can provide them in this pandemic time. I think of, and I meant to mention it earlier, our seniors that don't have the resources to go to medical appointments, sometimes they're 3 and 4 hours away. And we've been able to provide transportation to them to get to those medical appointments. And some of those appointments are very early in the morning or late in the afternoon into evening. And we're been able to come alongside them. That's been an important piece of what we do in community in Maple Creek.
Wow. Major Ed, I am so glad you are there. You're doing so many good and positive things. Things that only happen when you're in a community for a long period of time. So thank you so much for your dedication. At this time, we're going to switch to our final presenter. That is Executive Director Major Judy Regame at the Crossroads Residential Services. Welcome, Major Judy.
Thanks, Tim. It's a privilege to be here and to be part of this presentation. I've been a Salvation Army officer for 40 years. And if you don't know, we get transferred from place to place. And and it's our privilege to be back in Saskatoon. I was born and raised in Saskatchewan, Melfort actually, so it's so good to be home. My appointment that I'm responsible for is Crossroads Residential Services and Saskatoon Temple and Canadian Family Services in Saskatoon. Crossroads, let me tell you a little bit about Crossroads Residential Services. We have 3 buildings, one that is on the corner of Avenue T and 19th Street in Saskatoon. And that building is sort of our main center. We have a building on Avenue T, which has become a men's transitional housing unit. And we have a girls' home in Sutherland, which is on Cruise Street, and that is for girls aged 12 to 18. In our emergency shelter that's on Avenue T, we house men who are 18 years of age and older. They can stay with us for up to 2 weeks, and we try to find them permanent housing. They would see a caseworker, and we try to find them permanent housing while they're with us. On Avenue T, we have a transitional home, again for men who are aged 18 and older, and they're able to stay with us a little bit longer. One of the things that we have found is that guys will come to us, they'll stay in our shelter, we try to find them permanent housing, they move to their own apartment, they lose their apartment, they come back to us. It's a bit of a cycle. And so for some of them. And so we thought if we could have this transitional place where they could stay for a year even, possibly longer, where we could help them work on some of the barriers that are keeping them from obtaining and keeping their permanent housing. So that's what the place on Avenue T is all about. Then of course we've got Cruise Street Bethany Home, which actually has been in operation for many, many years. It used to be called the Bethany, the Unwed Mother's Home and Hospital. Babies were actually born in that building, which is kind of an interesting thing. That was on our older building on Avenue T. On Queen Street. Anyway, now Bethany Home is for girls who are having trouble transitioning into a foster home. They may be having some difficulties where they can't stay, and so they need a place to sort of land and see what the difficulties are and to find them a better place to live. So social services actually brings us the girls and they live with us, and we try to help stabilize them. They could stay with us for a week, sometimes longer, sometimes a month. During the COVID time, we've had girls stay with us for quite a bit longer, which has been a good thing. Saskatoon Temple and Family Services is located on Bateman Crescent. Saskatoon Temple is our church, and Family Services is run out of that building. The church, of course, as Ed was saying, how do you do church in this COVID time? It's been very challenging. We also have run our Family Services out of the church building. The Family Services has been running a program that probably for over 30 years, that's probably the best homelessness prevention program that I've seen the Army do. It's a trust program. And so folks are mandated, the folks that we work with, many of them are mandated to come to us through social services. And we make sure that their rent is paid, that their utilities are paid, and they have a safe place to live. And then they would be issued the rest of their check to spend as they chose. But they have a place to live. That is so important. So it's a great program that they run. They also, as Ed mentioned, did the backpack program. What an exciting time that was. We just distributed all the backpacks last week. We did 1,307 backpacks. So that was kind of a fun thing to see in action. and challenging to figure out how do we get our volunteers to actually pack these backpacks and remain, socially distant and that sort of thing. And how do people come and pick up the backpacks? All those details were worked through by our staff, and 1,307 kids got a backpack. So I thought that was really great. Another thing that Family Services does is the Nutrient Food on the Move. That has been a program that's been running for several years, and they deliver, our staff use the emergency disaster vehicle and deliver lunches for kids who might be playing in the playgrounds or wherever. They have several spots that they drive to, and they can give out a little lunch for the kids. So that's been a great program, which we really appreciate the support from Nutrien. Some of the effects that COVID had on us, of course, as Ivy said on that day, I mean, we didn't have to lock our doors, but we did have to make some pretty big changes. First of all, one of the big things that we had to change was our community meals. We would offer community meals to the public for $2. They could come and have vegetables and potatoes and meat and a really nice meal for $2. One day I was at Tim Hortons actually last summer, and I was listening to a couple of gentlemen. I guess I was eavesdropping. As soon as they say Salvation Army, my ears perked up, right? And I wanted to hear what they had to say. So this one guy says, "Oh, you should come with me down to the Salvation Army. You can get a whole meal for $2 and it's really good." I thought, what great advertising that is, right? Word of mouth. And so I guess they were going to come down to the Salvation Army for supper that night. But I thought that was kind of a neat thing. Anyway, that was one of the first things that we had to close down, was our community meals. We had a couple of guys actually who had graduated from our residential program. They had lived with us for quite a few years, and we finally were able to house them. But they relied daily on us for their meals because they were old bachelors and not the best at cooking, and you could tell their health was suffering. And so some of our staff were able to arrange to freeze some of the meals that we were serving, or to buy some TV dinners or whatever and take it over to them, because they only live across the alley from us. And so we were able to still help in that small way. For some of the community. But it's great to work with staff residents that live with us. Another thing that had to change was that the capacity of our dorms had to be reduced. And so we have 2 large dorms, one with 15 guys that sleep there and one with 12 guys that sleep there. Well, there's no way we could do that. So we actually, we had some renovations done that seemed to take forever. But anyway, they finally got finished right at the beginning of March. So we had 7 extra spaces that we could take some of those dorm guys, the guys sleeping in the dorms, and put them there. We also had this property on Avenue T, and we thought, there's 10 bedrooms, 10 private bedrooms in that building that we could use. We could take some more guys out of the dorm and put them there. Well, that turned out just to be a great solution for us. So we were able to do that. We also had to stagger our meal time, right? Because you can't have all these guys coming down for a meal. And I think we can house about 50 guys in the dining room. Well, you couldn't do that. So we had to figure out a way to have them come down in groups. And so we issued everybody a meal card. And they had a specific color. And so even yet, I mean, we're still doing it, right? You call the blue cards down for their meal and the green cards next. And we didn't have a captain's table, though. It kind of reminded me of a cruise ship or something, right? Where you come down in groups or whatever. But anyway, it was kind of a good solution, because the guys, They knew what color it was, and they'd come down when their color was called. And so there was no sort of mingling and waiting in the lobby. We were able to keep those crowds, kind of big groups of people, separate. We also had to open up 2 more dining rooms. So we have a chapel that we turned into a dining room. We have an education room that we turned into a dining room. So there were 3 different places. So not only did your color mean you went down at a certain time for a meal, it also indicated what dining room you were eating in. So that really helped us get through that piece of it. Of course, we've had to up the cleaning. I mean, we've always tried to keep up with the cleaning, but a little different now, sanitizing door handles and railings and making sure guys wash their hands, which is not an easy task, let me tell you. But, you know, they tried to cooperate as much as they could. They were getting sick of being sprayed with hand sanitizer, but they still, they know it's important. And we have a wash basin that, not a wash basin, a sink with running water that they could wash their hands right before they picked up their meal. And so we had to institute that. And for the most part, the guys were cooperative of that. One of the things that we needed to do was increase our programming. And so we've got a couple of chaplains who were willing to jump right in and increase programming. We all heard those advertisements about you know, stay safe, stay home. But if you have no home, is a very different concept. Like, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? And so our guys that came to us, we tried to have as many activities as we could. We got a great donation from Cameco, and which helped us with programming ideas. And so we really encouraged guys to stay put and not wander around. Bethany Home, that was challenging to keep the girls at home. If you've ever had a teenager in your house, you will know keeping a teenager home is not an easy thing. And so again, with this Cameco money, we were able to buy some Xboxes. We've had Xbox tournaments. We bought this basketball thing for indoors, and we were able to do that. I mean, we've really upped the game with programming just to encourage those girls and to encourage our guys to stay put. One of the neat things that we did here was, or over at the Avenue T property, was to have the chaplains do sort of a woodworking and gardening program. They, one of the chaplains got some guys together, and they actually dug a little garden, which has produced a great crop. But it was so neat. We had one guy who was helping with the garden, and he's kind of a biker, and so, well, he is a biker. So he's wearing these big boots and his leather stuff, and he's in the garden, and he looks at his boots and he says, "I think my boots are going to get dirty doing this. There's mud on them." So he hadn't done any gardening, right? So anyway, it was a little bit humorous. So he decided that was not the job for him. But we also had some guys doing some woodworking stuff, which was really interesting. They hadn't, for them to actually build something. They were building these flower boxes, and they built, they built picnic tables and swings, and we were able to share some of that with the neighbors. Again, Cameco, thank you for that donation. We were able to buy wood and tools, and the guys, it kept them busy, and they actually could see what they had made. So it was kind of a neat experience. Our food services manager actually was going to deliver some food to the Avenue T property, which it actually has a name now. It's called Pathways on Avenue T. But anyway, he was delivering some food, which he was stopped as he was going in by one of the neighbors. And so the neighbor said, "You know, I just want to thank you. The chaplains and the guys have done such a great job making this property look so good," because we had planted flowers. Not we, they had planted flowers out in the front, and it was so neat. And so this guy said, "You know, I've always worked on my backyard, but I've never done anything to the front yard because well, for whatever reason. So he said, I've decided this year to plant some flowers in my front yard. And my cousin lives down the street and he's going to do the same thing. And we have a friend who lives on this same street. We're all going to plant flowers in our front yard. And we were able to share a flower box with a couple of the neighbors, and they were planting flowers. And he said, you know, it's just so nice to be part of the neighborhood and it feels like a neighborhood. So I thought that was a really neat story to come out of this whole COVID thing, that it sort of brought the neighbors together and to beautify one part of the city. As we continue forward, there are some things that we're concerned about. For example, the community meals. We don't know when we'll be able to provide those. We are trying to come up with an idea maybe of a mobile unit that might go out and serve soup to people. We're very conscious though of groups gathering. We want to be really careful with that. Maybe it might look like that.
Yes, I don't know. We're just trying to sort some of those details out. Christmas carols coming up. We're trying to figure out what this out looks like this year. Do we go into malls? Cash, so many of us never use cash anymore, eh? In some places, some of us
Pay cash. So there's some pretty big challenges that we're facing in trying to figure out how is this going to work this year. If you've got any ideas, let me know. But you know, we're not out of the woods yet. We recognize that. Ivy, you're right. We're in this for the long haul. But we continue to practice the safety precautions that we've put in place. And we continue to offer our program. That doesn't change. Much has changed, but let me tell you, not our desire to give hope to those who need it most.
Well, thank you so much, Major Judy. My goodness, so many things you guys are doing in Saskatoon. What was that number? 1,307 backpacks? That's incredible. So I have a couple questions.
I forgot to mention, we also delivered in this Food on the Move, we also delivered 21,522 lunches to kids over the summer. That's
21,500 lunches from the Nutrient Food on the Move?
Yes, and 22. Don't forget the 22.
The 22 counts. That's for certain, Judy. That's incredible. That's amazing. Okay, I have a couple questions here. Just bear with me. I'm having a little trouble with my sound. One of the things that I heard quite a bit is the changes you've had to make at Crossroads. As soon as things hit, you had to get creative on where you had to sleep people and how important it was to try to take care of them. We started in March. We didn't even hit the worst of our winters. How do you see this winter playing out?
Well, you know, I don't think we will ever go back to 15 guys sleeping in a room. The dorm thing, I think, is gone for good. So we're in the process now of trying to figure out, I mean, we've got the Avenue T program up and running. That's going to give us 10 extra beds. We've got the renovated part of our building with 7 extra beds, but that's still not enough. So we're going to try to partition off some of those dorms to make them into individual rooms, because, you know, if you've got a guy coughing through the night, I mean, that's going everywhere, right? So we really need to look at individual rooms for sure.
Wow. Yeah, we only have a few seconds left. I have a quick question for you. Is there anything that you missed the most from pre-COVID that you're anxious to get started?
You know, we did a really neat thing, our kitchen staff, and we've been sponsored for this program, I think a few years ago, but it's special meals. We found that over Christmas, there were so many community meals. The city of Saskatoon is so generous, and there were always a lot of Christmas meals. So we decided that we would do these special meals. So it was like an ordinary day for ordinary people who would come in, and boom, they'd have this incredible meal, and they wouldn't know it was coming, and they'd be seated, there'd be tablecloths and fancy dishes, and they'd have an hors d'oeuvre and a salad and soup and a nice, one time we were sponsored by this meal, but we got prime rib. I mean, really, what, for $2, they got a prime rib dinner, and they had dessert, and, you know, the table, there was decorations, nice lighting. You know, it was such a neat thing for such an ordinary day, right? And
Wow.
I really miss that. And so I'm hoping that one day we can come back to that, because it was such a treat for these folks.
That's a great way to end this, Judy. I've always been amazed on how people get creative to show dignity and respect, and that was just, and a lot of love with that last gift. That's incredible. This actually sums up our speaker portion of the presentation today. Thank you so much, everyone that's been able to help. First off, I'd like to thank Major Les Marshall for leading us today. Executive Director Ivy Scobie from the William Booth Special Care Home, Major Ed Dean at the Maple Creek Community Church, and Executive Director Judy Regame at the Crossroads Residential Services and the Saskatoon Temple and the Bethany Home. Judy, you're busy. I also finally like to thank my co-host Roberta Pronto, and for Karen in the background that's making all of this possible. Last but not least, we want to thank you so much, the donors. Everything you've heard today is only possible because of your generosity. Sincerely, we cannot fill in the gaps to make this life filled with dignity and to give hope to the vulnerable without your help. So on behalf of myself and the entire team here at the Salvation Army, we want to say a sincere thank you. To finish off the presentation today, we have a video from Lieutenant Colonel John Murray. We'll be sticking around to answer any questions. If you have any, please use that chat button. It's not too late. We'll make sure that we can do everything we can to answer them. Thank you again for joining us, and God bless.
When COVID-19 brought the world to a standstill, it also put the future of hundreds of thousands of Canadians in jeopardy. More than ever, our communities needed us, and we needed you. Thanks to you, and because of your generosity and kindness, hungry school-aged children received food. Struggling families knew where they could find their next meal, and lonely seniors were able to digitally connect with their loved ones. People experiencing homelessness found a safe place to sleep, and our food banks were stocked to meet the increased demand for assistance. Our work is not over. Indeed, it is only just beginning as the recovery effort continues. We're grateful for your support and invite you to visit salvationarmy.ca for up-to-date information on the Salvation Army's COVID-19 response. On behalf of the Salvation Army and those we've served during the COVID-19 pandemic, thank you. Together, we're giving hope today.